Pretty sure I tweeted. Yep. No, there it is. Sorry. We'll give it a second for the 3 people to show up. All right.
I see the Q&A is live for me. I see Q&A. Yeah.
All right. You know, it is it Tuesday? What is today?
Today is Tuesday.
I'm ready to not work.
So the funny thing is, the week 2 weeks ago, you said I was on vacation, and I was not on vacation.
You were totally on vacation. You were sitting around.
Now I am on vacation, but I'm here just for you. Well,
Are you seriously on vacation?
Well, they gave us a week after build off because we have like not slept in months.
You get the week off?
I get the week technically off.
Oh my god!
But I'm like doing emails and stuff today, so.
I have 500 emails and that's oh my goodness. This week I need to not work. I'm just so tired. I need to learn how to not work also, which is a problem.
A question came in. I think the Q&A is happening.
Oh, okay, cool. All right.
It's all happening.
Then let's start. So I think Damien's on vacation. So.
This is so great here. You should see it. It's just amazing.
It says Damien.
I've ever been on.
It says Damien in Redmond in your lower third. So.
Oh, did I spoil the illusion?
Ruin the illusion.
Otherwise,
I was fully convinced.
That's the fake part. This bit here.
Everything else
you're seeing is real.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I think it's hilarious that it's a black shirt on a white background and it still can't figure out that the thing below your chest, the thing below your head, may very well be your chest.
It's tracking my head pretty well, though. I have to admit.
It's tracking your head very well, but the background doesn't work at all.
Yeah. No, I had a wonderful vacation.
Did you?
Very relaxed.
My hobbit hole.
In your hobbit hole, indeed.
Yeah, that works really well. All right, cool. It is the ASP.NET Community Stand-Up. It is frickin' Tuesday. Oh my
goodness. Okay. I'm excited about it.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to take away those features from you. I don't even know what you're doing.
That's awesome.
You're an idiot. I don't know why you think this is funny.
Just get serious, guys.
All right,
there are buttons,
focus.
And I push them and things happen. What is that?
Well, so true story. I'm doing build, and I go and I do a Channel 9 video, and I seriously almost hurt myself last week. See, I don't even know what's going on. And someone in the comments of a Channel 9 video said my beard was weak.
Damn, dude. Oh, there you go. Fixed.
Yeah.
You know, Channel 9 probably can do that. Like, they probably have a machine. They've got tons of boxes and gear.
What constitutes a strong beard?
Not this. It's a set of all beards that are not mine.
Remember, you're in San Francisco, competing with the hipster beards in San Francisco.
I'm in Portland. We invented the waxed mustache.
Yeah, indeed.
All right. So here's a lovely thing from our friend Brandon, who's trolling us here. Where's the best place to ask questions? Should I put them in GitHub issues? Yes, we're having questions issues, but right now the Q&A does work. If you're watching this on YouTube, there should be a little thing at the bottom that says join the conversation. If you're watching it in Google Hangouts, there should be a Q&A thing on the right. Worst case scenario, you can call John Galloway at his house at 608-555. Tweet John. Or there you go. See, we've got questions.
I see questions are pouring in.
Someone is able to get the questions. We apologize, but it's a free service from Google that we're using, so we're doing the best we can. Cool. Yeah. So build was cool. Exhausting, but good.
Yeah, I heard good things.
You heard good things?
I heard good things. I watched all the talk. I watched my team's talks over the past couple of nights.
Yeah, we did okay. I thought we did okay. We had some good.
Pretty well. Pretty well. It went well.
Cool. Okay, so you're back off of vacation.
I'm back.
And so you're fully prepared. I am probably going to work half-time this week because I'm broken. I'm shattered.
Mm-hmm.
My ears are clogged and my everything's a mess. But what do we have for you for the people today?
Well, Galloway, do you have
Do you
any
want some community
things?
stuff, John?
I do. I got a few to run through real quick.
All right,
So
let's
Let's do
share
that
the
first.
screen here. And then I forwarded you a couple questions that came in over email, John.
I saw that. That's exciting. Okay, actually, I just saw one. Sharing away. Okay, so first of all, you mentioned build. So here's on the web dev blog. Here's a wrap up of all the posts and stuff from build.
Ah, this is excellent. This is our blog. Yeah, so make sure that you subscribe to this because you notice that that's by Jeff Fritz, and Jeff is doing a great job keeping the blog up to date lately. It is a thankless job, but do this for me, friends. Leave a comment to Jeff and tell him he's doing a good job, because we've got great comments. Actually, if you go back last week, we've had content all month long. We're having all sorts of people from the team blog. We've got more developers, not just PMs that are blogging. So let's go ahead and check that. Look at that. See? So and we'll also find the notes for the community stand-up here as well.
Yep. Notes for community stand-up. And actually, one I wanted to point out, too, that I'd forgotten about here was he did a whole write-up on dependency injection on ASP.NET Core. So I was out on Reddit yesterday looking at questions on ASP.NET Core, and somebody was like, how does dependency injection work? And I'm like, Jeff Fritz just wrote it. He just answered your question. So lots of great stuff. So
wait a second. Does that count? We can get rid of a question?
No, it was on Reddit.
Okay.
Yeah, no double credit. So one of the things that Jeff called out towards the end of the post was, well, here's one also he didn't get. Actually, meant to bug him, but here was a Q&A we did. So this was a lot of fun. This was a live Q&A with Channel 9 team. Here is something from our friends with the ASP.NET Monsters on donut hole caching. So this has been kind of an interesting thing over time, how you can cache just a portion of a page or just everything but a portion of the page. So that is a nice 12-minute video.
Is it donut caching or donut hole caching?
Yeah, I thought I always called that one fragment caching, and donut caching was when you cached the outside and then punched a hole in the middle and had that bit update. But
so this is donut hole caching.
Just fragment caching, I think.
Yeah, fragment. But fragment doesn't sound as appetizing as donut hole caching.
Okay. Depends on if it's a fragment of a donut.
Yeah. So then donut would be when you're caching everything but a fragment, and then so this is donut hole.
Okay.
Cool. One other. So this is something that I saw that. This is something that I worked on quite a bit. This is why I didn't sleep the past month. So we did these code labs live at Build. We had 108 lab machines in a room. We had the room packed all day, the whole conference. One of the biggest complaint, or really the main complaint, was people couldn't get in. So I guess that's an okay problem to have. But so we've got tons of labs in here, all the code, all the source code. Here's an example where we did an Angular 2 app. So we start with hello Angular 2 and build all the way up to...
oh, wow. That looks fantastic.
Yeah, so like here's an example. This is master details, which I know is kind of like eyes glaze over a little bit, but this is real world. And so this is an Angular 2 app with ASP.NET Core on the back end. Master details and all that stuff.
This is great. Now, how long does this take, do you think, if you start this lab? Is this a 4-hour lab, or how many hours is this lab?
They were targeted at an hour, but you're trucking to make it in an hour. So,
a casual 2 hours or 3 hours, maybe?
2 to 3 hours for each one, and there are 4 labs. So,
all right.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff here.
These are great. I'm actually going to Peru in a couple weeks, and I'm going to take those there with me.
Yep,
I'm going to do these down there.
And I will point out the stuff that you did, Damien and David, or Damien, that you did with David at NDC, some of your stuff on ASP internals, your labs. So we built those out further, and so this is
awesome.
Those with tons more stuff. So
I look forward to reappropriating those for the workshop.
We just pass them back and forth.
Orlando and Austin and Oslo this year.
Yep, good stuff. Okay, one of the things. So this is a new document from Rick Anderson and friends out on the Docs site on globalization and localization. So this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and this is really cool to see, like, in-depth document written up on that. So,
awesome.
Cool. This is from Cecil Phillip. This is from a talk he gave in Orlando, I believe, and he took a Web API 2 and migrated it to ASP.NET Core. So here he's got kind of before and after code, and you can see how he stepped through. So there's not like in-depth documentation, but there's just before and after code. So I thought that was kind of cool to see that. Maria Schultz writing on inline routing constraints with ASP core, and so that's cool. Kind of nice, straightforward post, but nice to see that documented. This is Mike Brind, and he's writing about using a tool from Stackify called Prefix, and using that for heavyweight application performance monitoring. So he shows how he set that up.
Oh, this is cool. So this, they actually sponsored my blog last week, and I saw this for the first time a couple of weeks ago. It's worth checking out. One of the things that's nice about it is that they have a live demo. So it's not just like, you know, download a trial. They put up a live demo site. It's kind of like Glimpse meets Elma meets App Insights. You know, it's like all, you know. I showed it to the Glimpse folks. Definitely brings some competition, which is great.
Cool. Okay. So this is from Richard Keene, and he's writing about running a ASP.NET Core site on Joyent. So this is their Triton container technology. So it's nice to see, you know, here he's talking to people. Normally a lot of Joyent customers are not even aware really of ASP.NET, and so it's cool to see that kind of the overall idea of like, hey, this runs everywhere, and people are actually spinning this up on a lot of different platforms. So that's cool. This is one from Marcin, and I actually meant to feature this a while ago, and his blog was down the day that of the stand-up, and then we had build and all this stuff. So here he's talking about ASP.NET Core Redis, and he's using Redis HTML cache, and so nice meaty post, lots of you know, lots of code, long. So great post. So I worked with Nicholas on those those labs that I showed you earlier, and that Angular 2 app. We went through a lot of iterations on how to best set it up. So, you know, to get Angular 2 working. You know, I've featured a lot of posts over, you know, recently talking about Angular 2, and we kind of went through those. We went through a lot of different things. So he helped. He was a developer that helped me write those labs up, and then he documented a few of those. So he's written some cool posts. Here's on routing, and he did another one on using Angular 2 HTTP, the HTTP object or library or import, I guess. So here's how he configured HTTP. Here was something that was announced yesterday at the MS Edge Dev thing. They did a
Can you expand on that, other than just the MS Edge Dev?
Yeah, well, so they had a live conference. It was with a lot of, it was streamed on Channel 9, but they had like a lot of, you know, top people there. So it was like, I think it was in Silicon Valley. So they talked about a lot of different things that they're working on with Edge Dev. One thing that they pointed out that was kind of neat is that they're sharing their platform data. So they have both an API usage and an API catalog. What's interesting with this is Google Chrome does some API tracking as well. They have it out on their platform, Google Chrome platform system. Theirs is from user tracking, and the Edge Dev team does theirs from crawlers. So they crawl some of the top sites all around. So this is important for web devs. You can see actually which like for instance here, CSS properties are most used. So this is good to know for testing and developing. They also have this thing here where you can look at API catalog, and I thought this was neat. You can go in and look at visualizations. You can see like the overlap, and I was playing with this between, you know, Edge and Chrome and Safari, and you can see, you know, specifically where the overlap is and stuff, and you can drill in and so good information to know just for general web dev. So this is from Fanny Reinders, and he goes through, this is a video and a post and code on MVC, how it works in ASP.NET Core.
This is nice because here they've included the slides on SpeakerDeck and embedded them. This is just a good best practice for blogs, as well as video of the user group. I would really encourage more people to record themselves giving videos. You know, it might be nerve-wracking, but it makes for a better experience. You've got a balance here of slides, video, and text. So this is great.
This is great. I mean, I'm guessing in this room, who knows, there might be few dozen people, but by sharing it this way, we can get it out to thousands of people, right? So here he's got,
Absolutely.
this is really cool. And let me see. Here, actually, kind of transitioning over, we had a question, Scott, that you forwarded over to me. This was from Brian Erickson, and he said, I used to use this, and here's the link he's pointing out here. I used to use this to set up ASP.NET 5 builds for Visual Studio Team services. So he's wondering if this can be on the to-do list for when RC2 comes out. He wants to be able to set up Visual Studio Team services for ASP.NET Core builds. So that is a question, not a link.
Okay.
Cool.
We will make sure that that's covered. I think that's covered in our matrix. So
Okay,
we use
cool.
to verify.
I'm done.
Magical. Excellent job. All right. Let's go through some questions, unless you want to say anything specific, Mr. Edwards.
So I'm, as I said, just coming back from a week off. We, as of yesterday, have entered a period that we call Ask mode. That's A-S-K. Microsoft Engineering in a lot of teams has traditionally gone through a bunch of named milestones, and you would have sort of open check-ins where you do your feature development and just open bug fixing, and basically everyone just codes based on what they do. Then we would enter a period called Tell mode as we get closer towards our planned release date, and Tell mode would be where you're still free to check in bug fixes, but you're expected to tell a central authority, group of people, about every check-in that you make. And some of these practices stem from a long time ago. It may sound a little antiquated based on how people build software today, but we don't always follow these processes in today's world. And then after tell mode, as the bug bar would get higher, as we get closer and closer to locking down for release, you would enter what's called ask mode. So you move from tell mode to ask mode, and basically the burden of approval flips at that point. And so you can no longer just check in code. You have to email or show up in a meeting with physical people and make your case for why you want to be able to commit this change into what's considered a stable code base that we're shutting down for release. So we actually just entered that ask mode phase. Other teams involved with this release, including the .NET team themselves, when it comes to CoreFX and the CLR and the CLI. Some of those teams have entered the next phase, which is called escrow. And escrow typically meant, it was called escrow because it was kind of, we have sent the disk, that, the gold disk, off to the manufacturers to be pressed into millions of different copies of Windows or Visual Studio or Office or whatever. But before that actually made it to the factory, it was held in escrow, waiting for any critical bugs that were found during late testing or verification that would require us to reset escrow. We would have to basically back out of the escrow phase, assess the damage, look at the fix, make the determination of whether we want to take that fix, and if so, there was some obvious cost involved in doing that because the release crank had already started being turned. So they're already in escrow. Obviously today that means nothing because we just ship bits on NuGet and GitHub and those type of things, but it still represents that kind of phase of where they're at. And so because some teams are very much upstream of the chain of pieces that we're trying to ship, obviously things like the CoreFX libraries, the core CLR itself, they're very core dependencies that everyone else requires, so they have to lock down earlier. So they've already entered that escrow phase, which is why some people may have seen the milestone on GitHub for those repos is actually, there's an RC2 milestone and they have a date set of like April 15th. Please don't read too much into those dates. Those dates are just nominal dates entered in to allow us to use GitHub to track issues and things like rough burn downs and those type of things. They are not public announcements of dates. When we announce a date, we will do an announcement. I'll do it here, or they'll do it in the .NET stand-up, and we'll do a blog post like we promised to do previously. Don't just look to GitHub and say, oh look, they filled in the date field on the milestone. That's a public announcement. That's not how we've used it. So they have entered the escrow phase. It doesn't mean they don't have bugs. We will still, I'm sure, find issues, but we consider those pieces to be quite stable. The .NET CLI, and then conversely us, ASP.NET Core, we've just entered ask mode. So we are in the phase of trying to really, really lock down now, and every single check-in that's made has to get approved by myself and Alon, who's the dev manager. And we basically look at the check-in, we talk to the dev, and we understand why this code fix has to be made, and assess what type of impact we think that might have on the, what type of churn, what risk of regression, those type of things, and then we either approve or disprove that. Now that or deny that. We're still early on in that phase, so the bar is quite low. We let quite a lot through, and then as we progress through this phase, the bar will become ever higher and will become more strict. Now that said, I still think we have a fair way to go. Like, I'm still not at a phase right now today where I can grab a build off a build server that includes all the Visual Studio bits and templates that are up to date and all those type of things, install it as a customer would, and then start writing apps. Until I can personally, as the product owner, get to that phase, I'm not willing to commit to a date, right? And I'm very comfortable saying that publicly because I want to ensure that I can, when I come out and say, I have used the product today in a form that we will be giving it to our customers in, and I feel confident after having used the product for an hour or so that I can estimate when I think that will be done. We're not there yet, so I'm not quite ready to say that, but we have entered that ask mode phase, so we're getting much, much closer. If you just want to install the .NET CLI itself and use the libraries and things, those are in a much better state. Like, you can download, I literally did that this morning. I downloaded the latest exe from the GitHub site for .NET/CLI. I ran it. It detected I had an earlier build, so then I uninstalled that first, and then I installed the newer one, and then I went to my command line, typed .NET, and it was there. So those installers have gotten to a pretty good state, so that's good. But again, they're upstream of us. We're kind of the most downstream thing, so we have the we have to rely and wait on everything else to be stable before we can really assess how stable we are, because we need all their stuff to work before we can make our stuff work properly. But we're getting, I think a couple of, there were probably some mentions made. I think Hunter may have said in a Q&A session that we're targeting April for RC2. That's a true statement. We're targeting April. It's not a guarantee like any of these dates. As I said just before, I'm still unable to sit down, grab an exe, install it, then open Visual Studio, do file new, ASP.NET Core app, and run it. So until I can do that, and then do another couple of hours of work, upgrade live ASP.NET and a couple of other websites, deploy them to Azure, et cetera, et cetera. Until I can do those things, even if I have a few bugs in the way, until I can do those things, I'm not willing to make an estimate. But a bunch of people are still optimistic that we could hopefully hit an RC2 sometime in April, but I'm not making any announcements on dates just yet, other than the ones I just did. So that's good, I hope.
That's good. I appreciate
that's the detail that people appreciate. I mean, I know people want to hear me come out and say, we will ship on April 18th, or whatever it is, but as I said, I have my reasons, and I've made them public, and so I hope everyone appreciates the approach and the attitude I'm taking towards this.
Well, pragmatic is the goal, and shipping is the goal, and that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I fully appreciate that good artists ship, but I also appreciate that we want to ship good stuff, and so we just want to make sure we ship the right thing and we do it at the right time, not too early.
And this is this is, like you said before, this is a framework we want to last for a long time, right? So yeah. Rushing is not a good thing. And we heard that from the community earlier. They were not happy when we ship things that, Yeah. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and especially given that .NET Core in itself is a new addition to the .NET ecosystem, and if you haven't watched Scott Hunter's and Hanselman's talk at Build, where they talk about the future of .NET, I encourage people to watch that. It's a fantastic talk. It introduces and talks about a bunch of the foundational concepts that we are introducing, brand new concepts like the .NET Standard Library, .NET Core, and what it means moving forward. I encourage you to watch those. We are trying to get those are part of what we're shipping. So we need to get those things right to enable the next 5, 10, 15 years of innovation on .NET in a much broader landscape than it had been for the past 15 years. When you add things like Xamarin and Mono and IoT and microservices and cloud, like all these new scenarios that just didn't exist before, and cross-platform, we want to make sure we set ourselves up in good stead for that. So.
Cool.
Questions?
Questions?
Yeah.
All right. Someone's saying they want the core schedule. I am deleting them. Any ETA for RC2? No. All right. What can we expect in terms of difficulty migrating RC1 to RC2?
Good question. So we have started work on the RC1 to RC2 migration doc. Let me just tap the keyboard here and see if that's actually public. So we have a docs repo. Is there a branch? Let's have a look. Is there a migration? No, RC. There is an RC2 branch. If I look in the RC2 branch, let's have a look. What commits have been made in here? Rename, March, Doesn't look like it yet. So there is, as I said, there are docs being worked on for migration. Difficulty, it really depends. So some things will be more difficult than others. Overall, I don't think it'll be super difficult. So there will be some slight project structure changes and things like Project JSON. Some things will have moved around a little bit. The tooling in Visual Studio will support both RC1 projects and RC2 projects, that is DNX projects and .NET Core CLI projects. So you'll be able to open them, open your RC1 project after you install the RC2 tooling, and then go through the motions of upgrading that to RC2 by following through the documentation. There are numerous API changes around, throughout the framework as we, ASP.NET I'm talking about here, as we sort of stood back and made sure we had a nice consistent use of the new patterns and new APIs that we introduced. We did see some inconsistencies across the many packages and repos that we have, so we cleaned a lot of those up. And then in replanning on .NET Core, we made a couple of changes into how ASP.NET Core applications start up, in that they're now console applications. They're self-host. That's what ASP.NET Core apps are. They're .NET Core apps that you boot ASP.NET inside of your program main. So there's a fairly nice sort of hosting API that you, one line effectively, one expression that you can start, configure, and then run your ASP.NET application from your program main. So that will have to be added to your project. Other than that, as you get further out, so the concentric circles of API, less and less people are impacted. So I will endeavor to go through an academic exercise of trying to upgrade one of my apps, maybe the live ASP.NET site. I'll create a branch and I'll start moving that to RC2, and then maybe I'll be able to answer that question a little more from first-party experience rather than just based on what I know has changed. I'd like to actually experience that so I can actually answer that question better. But it won't be catastrophic. It's still ASP.NET Core. It still looks very much like it did in RC1, but there will be tweaks at pretty much every layer all the way through, and depending, that will impact you based on what you used previously. So.
All right. Will RC2, I'm not sure how to express this, will RC2 be fully CLI functional, will it require some DNX specific configuration?
It will be all CLI. There will be no
all
DNX.
CLI.
Yeah.
No DNX.
DNX
For RC1, DNU publish required the manual triggering of a gulp. What's the .NET publish process going to be like? For
so even in RC1, you are able to hook DNU publish up with gulp, or vice versa. So you could, using the scripts section, your project JSON, you could register a pre-publish script, or post-build script, or prepare script, or post-restore. We had all these sort of lifecycle events. And you could run gulp as part of your publish step. In fact, I do this on the live ASP.NET website. So I mean, if you look at the source for that, make sure I'm not a liar, I'm pretty sure I did that. Live.asp.net, and if I go into the source of this, and I'll share my screen once I find this. Waiting for things to load, source, and I look in my project JSON. So down in the script section, let me just share this down here so I can show people. So I just remembered we did actually do a bunch of, I demoed some stuff last time. We got some great feedback that people really, I think, appreciated that. So we'll remember to do a little bit more of that next time. So let me know when you can see my screen. Should be up.
Yep.
I can see
Good.
it.
So you can see down here in the script section, this is an RC1 project. I've registered a pre-published script, at which point I install NPM packages, bower packages, and then I run a bunch of gulp tasks. And so that's how you integrate your publish, then you publish with your gulp or whatever other tools you want. These are just command line tools I'm running, basically. You can do the same thing in the .NET CLI. Okay.
Nice.
Okay.
A cross-platform question.
Mm-hmm.
Await and async internally uses I/O completion ports, which is Windows-based. How do you do await and async on?
So that statement is a little incorrect. So it only uses I/O completion ports. Let's rewind, do a quick history lesson. So I/O completion ports are a feature of Windows that allows you, when making an asynchronous I/O call, that is when you make a Win32 call to an I/O API, so something like a network call or a file I/O call or something like that, you can, at the time of making that call, tell Windows that you want to be notified about progress changes or completion of that API call via something called an I/O completion port. Now you, at that layer, are required to set up the I/O completion port queue, and you get given back a handle, and that handle is what you pass into your asynchronous I/O call so that the underlying Windows subsystem knows where to push the update message to, what queue, what handle, when that call completes. You are then also required as the programmer to poll that queue. You have to check that queue periodically to see if any completion events have come in. So it's actually nowhere near as magic as it sounds like. IOCP is just a mechanism to enable subsystems or any systems to push status updates to a separate place to the place that the call was made. Hence the term asynchronous. Asynchronous doesn't mean anything other than I made a method call and I didn't get a reply back from the method call on the same call stack. I get it back somewhere else, asynchronous to the invocation. Okay. Now, typically the way you do that with IOCP is you create manually dedicated threads in your application whose only job is to pull your IOCP queues that you set up, and based on the handles that you got back, and check for new completion messages that were sent to you by the calls that you made elsewhere in your application. And then it's your job to synchronize those completions back with the original invocation and do all the hand-holding and multi-threaded async goo to make all that work. .NET build a lovely threaded model on top of that that takes care of all that goo for you. So they have I/O threads that are managed by the .NET thread pool that you don't have to care about. They just do that work for you. They create IOCP queues for you on your behalf so that you don't have to do all that bookkeeping and marshalling yourself. And then when you call an asynchronous I/O API in .NET, whether it be begin foo, end foo, or one that is foo async that returns a task, they utilize all this subsystem that they built in .NET and then underneath that the Win32 subsystem to make it look like this magic IOCP async stuff is happening. It's not magic at all. It's just how the subsystem in Windows is built and then all the lovely layers of abstraction that .NET has layered on top of that. When you bring it all the way back around to the question, async and await has nothing to do with IOCP by itself. They are completely orthogonal. You can build async await over any API that wants to, at some point, notify you that the method call that you made has completed, but not notify you in line to the invocation in the same stack frame by blocking the thread that you made the method call on. Okay, so it is true that sometimes when you use async await, it is being used on an asynchronous method that maps to an asynchronous I/O operation that maps to a Win32 I/O call that then maps to IOCP being used to notify that callback and then all the way back up. On Linux, those same I/O calls will be using underlying subsystems called KQ and CPOL, I think they're called, EPOL, something. They have different mechanisms for doing asynchronous I/O and asynchronous call completion. But even in .NET, if you want to represent asynchrony in your API, but you're not making I/O calls, you can just manually create structures, task completion source, return the task from that, and then from any other thread at any other time, you can just call set complete on that TCS, and that will trigger the original holder of the task that you returned to then continue from their async await call. Okay, so that was a very long answer because async await is complicated and there's a lot of layers. But the short answer is it'll work because async await isn't really about ISCP. It's just an abstraction over lots of different ways of doing asynchrony.
Oops, I was muted. I was going to say no. I was giving a whole speech. It was amazing. You should have heard it.
Oh, okay.
I was going to say that was the most spectacular answer that I've ever heard.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You know what I mean? Like it was just complete, and it made total sense. And I totally knew all of that.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
No, I did know that async and await only related to I/O completion ports when it came to the I/O aspect of things. Hence, I/O completion ports.
Right.
But,
and actually,
all the other stuff was very good.
Is that a lot of those Win32 I/O APIs that support asynchrony often support other mechanisms for getting the async callbacks. It's just that ISCP is generally the most resource-friendly version of those various things. The other one is Windows eventing, and then the other one is you can just poll. You can just like sit in a thread and just spin lock and keep checking. Have you done that? Are you done that? Are you done yet? That will get you much better latency because you'll know as soon as it's done. But obviously, you take an entire thread just for that one call if you do that. So it's not particularly resource-friendly.
So here is actually an excellent question that I think that you can actually do something about because I've talked to you about this before. It's just one of the little administrivias that one needs to do. Is that maybe why are there no up for grab issues in ASP.NET MVC repo?
Some of that's maybe the whole ask mode business, right? I mean, we're not in a good spot.
I don't think we have
I could say that and just use that as my get out of jail free card, but I'm not going to lie. So the truth is, at some point many months ago, I sat down for a couple of hours and I did register a few of our repos on up for grabs because they have a website and you have to like tell them about your repo and then it shows up in the big website, all the rest of it. The truth is, and I think we've had this discussion before on the stand-up, is that I don't think we're just not mature enough as a team. We haven't made that a priority to really curate. I think really good up for grabs repos, they have someone who cares about it and they really curate those type of issues. And they say, look, this is a fantastic issue that falls under that up for grabs bucket. The issue itself isn't important enough to the product that we want to do it now as part of the current release that we're working towards. Because if it was, we would just do it, right? So we want this for this next 3 week release we're doing. We're not going to mark it as up for grabs and then forget about it. If we want it, we're going to do it. All right, that's really what it comes down to. But if there is a secondary set of issues that we think are good ideas, but we don't deem them important enough or urgent enough for the next milestone, and they're simple enough that we think they could be done by a community member with little to no interaction with the team on a daily basis, because obviously that takes resources and cycles and everything, away from both sides, then they would be good candidates in my mind for grabs in a project that's as complex as ASP.NET Core. We just haven't got to that point yet. That is something I would love for us to circle back around once we've released 1.0 RTM, and then as a team decide that that's something that we want to invest in. We want to put time when it comes to triaging issues, thinking about what we're going to put into the next milestone, whether that's 1 month or 3 months, or whatever we decide we're going to do our cadence after we release 1.0, and then come up with a process for determining what those bugs are, what are good fits, how to mark them in each of the repos, making sure all the repos do that, following them up again so that when the PRs get sent, that we actually are invested in going and researching those PRs and analyzing them and then reviewing them and then taking them in. Because let's face it, if we suddenly start making a lot of our bugs up for grabs and suddenly there are dozens or scores or even hundreds of bugs across the repos that are marked as up for grabs, we have to be willing and prepared to accept dozens and scores of maybe hundreds of PRs, and then we have to do the work to actually integrate those PRs. Like, that's not free. That costs us time and effort and developers to do that. So it's an investment. We just haven't done it yet.
Well, one other place that is up for grabs that maybe, I don't know if it's integrated on the up for grabs site, is in docs.asp.net.
Yes.
And there's those, if you go to docs.asp.net, anything that has a wrench next to it is kind of saying like, hey, this is a placeholder, we'd love some...
Well, I will stop you there. I mean, I wouldn't go as far as saying anything with a wrench is synonymous with up for grabs. It isn't.
Okay.
The wrench is so we have a document plan. We have put together what we want as the doc outline, and that is the table of contents. And the things we haven't written yet are wrenches. That doesn't then mean that we expect someone from the community can come in with all the context required to write an excellent article that is in depth and detailed and contextual that we would like it to be in that part of the document hierarchy. I mean, let's face it, writing a great blog post is very different to writing great reference material for everyone who uses the product. So
But
I don't want to discourage people, but we have had a number of community members offer and even attempt to build very complicated foundational documents, and it can be a fairly painful process because it takes a very long time to get the required level of context and history and knowledge and in-depth understanding of the product before you can build a really good foundational document for something as big as something like Razor or localization, or like it's not just like documenting this one interface. You have to document an entire concept, and it has to fit with the tone and the flow and the rest of the reference material.
So I guess the thing I'm thinking of is like the case with that localization thing that I pointed out. Rick Anderson was the lead author, but there were 2 or 3 other people that worked with him in the community.
That's great. Yeah,
That's
and I think when you've had someone, that's a great point. When you've had someone from the team assigned to work on this article, and it's the current one they're working on, that's probably a great time to have people jump in and help review the document, reword paragraphs, say, well, I think we're missing a bit of detail here, or perhaps you've repeated some stuff here, maybe a cross-reference would be better here. That would be great to get people's input on, because that's more of that early feedback, review, I can probably word this a bit better, that type of thing, as opposed to taking on a really large, like the whole job of building an article. That's a lot of work. I mean, we have doc writers here who are full-time employees of Microsoft, and they take weeks to write just one article, right? And then we pay external vendors to write some of the other articles, and that costs a lot of money. Like it is complicated work that takes a lot of time to write good docs.
We have like 1,000 questions.
Oh wow!
So
I'm taking a long time to answer them, but maybe just some rapid fire ones.
Your questions are your answers are amazing, but each one is its own podcast episode.
Let's do some rapid fire answers.
3 of each of Damian'sAnswers.com. Is there any plan to distribute .NET CLI through Homebrew?
Plan is a strong word. There's been many discussions. We may end up doing it again. I'm not quite sure where we landed on it for RC2 or RTM.
Yeah, but I know we're doing a PKG.
What's that?
I know we're doing a PKG.
We have a PKG, most definitely. Obviously, we have a tarball as well. Homebrew has been expressed. We used to do Homebrew because we had Mono, and then we could depend on Mono in Homebrew. Now we don't have that dependency. We just haven't got back to doing Homebrew. We found, other people were using PKGs and things to good success, but probably will.
All right, good. That was good practice for you on short answers.
Getting there.
When will the .NET Standard documentation be updated?
Which one are they referring to?
TFM changes, Net Standard, Net Core App.
So there are docs on the GitHub.net / core docs?
I think it's core docs, but I'm checking.
The core hyphen docs? Oh, I can't type.
I'm looking.
I read one last night. Yeah, core docs. Under docs, is this the one?
Yes, it's .NET / core-doc, and the docs, where do the docs end up at?
That's a great question. I don't know whether these are.
There they are. They're at .net.github.io/docs.
Hang on.
Yeah, so go to .net.github.io. We'll end up moving all this around and making it right.
Yeah. I know you're working on this at the moment itself, but there is a document called the .NET Platform Standard, which Fowler originally wrote.
That's a roadmap markdown. That's not in docs. That's elsewhere. I know what you're talking about.
But that has been moved. That doc has been moved.
Oh, stunning. And
Eric St. John from the .NET team has been doing work on that doc. And that is a very comprehensive doc that lists a whole bunch of things around the standard platform. It has some nice box diagrams and things. And I want to give that link out because it is a hard read, but it's a worthy read. And we will have more human-friendly docs at some point about these things.
So do me a favor, Damien. Put that on your list. Dig that up and tweet it, and I will amplify.
Well, we'll have it in the notes too. Jeff Fritz has that link handy. He said he'd put it in the notes.
Let's give Jeff more work. I like that idea.
Yeah.
Did I hear correctly that there are community stand-ups for the .NET CLI, .NET Core? Where do I find these, and what is the schedule? I know that there is a .NET stand-up of sorts. And I believe that they announce it it's called the On.NET show. go to twitter.com/dotnet, and they had one last yesterday. As far as schedule, we should bug them about that. What we're going to ultimately do, everything's in flux right now. Keep in mind, I know this is not an excuse, but it's an explanation. Build almost destroyed most of us. We are just now digging out. I've got 500 plus emails and a million things to do. One of the things that's on the list to do is to reconcile all these URLs, so when we start getting to the point where we're going to release something, everything's in one place. So like live.asp.net, I'd like a formal place for all live broadcasts, not just ASP.NET, to be scheduled and set up. So remember also, we just merged the ASP.NET team and the .NET team just in the last month or two. So working out those things and figuring that stuff out is happening because we were two teams before, and now we're one. So not an excuse, but a reason at least.
Yeah, and just to remind people, that's actually a lot of that work is. A lot of that work will make up the bulk of the work remaining before we can hit something like RTM. So there's obviously the engineering work, which is obviously incredibly important, but all the other part that comes with building a Microsoft sort of developer platform is all the stuff that you just talked about. Like, what are our web presences? What are the documentation? How do I go and find that things? What do the templates look like? What are the videos? Do I go to ASP.NET? Do I go to Microsoft.com/something? MSDN, is that still a thing? How do I get stuff in there? Doing all that type of stuff is actually a lot of people involved in doing that work and many, many months of planning, especially given that we're trying to make a lot of changes as we do it. We're not just integrating with existing systems, we're trying to make all our docs open source. We just merged two teams together, so we want to make sure we all use the same pipeline, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So.
Okay.
Sounds like excuses, but I'm not trying to make excuses.
Are there any features in ASP.NET Core that depend on a specific web server? For example, cache flush. Is there any feature matrix showing what server supports what? Has everything been abstracted away such that you could work on any web server?
No. Almost everything. Windows authentication only works on HTTP/sys and IIS. So that means Web Listener or IIS. Things like some features have native implementations in the web server. So when you use them on that web server, they may run better, or at least more optimized for that server. So things like static file handling, if you're running on HTTP/sys, it will call the underlying transmit file API, which allows it to do things like kernel caching. So you can say, please send foo.txt to the browser, you pass it a file handle instead of the contents of foo.txt, and then the kernel will flush the contents out without ever going back into user mode, all those type of tricks that they do. WebSockets is another one where some web servers have a native implementation of WebSockets, like IIS and HTTP/sys, whereas in other servers like Kestrel, it's just managed code that sits on top of the underlying TCP connection. It really, the only ones that really I think the only one that only works on one server, okay, there's two. Windows Auth, as I said. The other one is the concept of what's called opaque upgrade, but these are very advanced features. Opaque upgrade is the ability for application code to say, I just got an HTTP request, so I know that there's a TCP connection underlying that HTTP request. Can you please just give me that TCP connection as a stream, and then don't worry about processing requests on this connection anymore. I'm just going to deal with it as a TCP connection from now on. Okay. Kestrel supports that concept. The other two web servers don't.
Okay. That was another really. See, each one of these I want to dig into for half an hour. That was a good one.
Well, I mean, and by all means, maybe we should start taking some notes of these, and then we can circle back around.
Actually, that's an interesting point. So here's a balance, and I'd be interested in what the audience thinks. Here's a deal. We can do this kind of like shotgun approach to answering questions. Or we could have targeted topics each
we could even week. I wonder if we could use something like user voice or something and let people kind of vote up on things and, pick like specific topics to really drill into.
We can just do GitHub for that now because they have restrictions.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
tough one.
I mean, if people think that's a good idea, please let us know. I'm more than happy to create issues on the live ASP.NET repo, and we'll just create issues. I'll mark them as like topic suggestions, and then people can vote. And if it gains traction, then maybe we'll try that out. I don't know.
Yep.
All right.
SignalR client code for core.
Yeah, so the SignalR client code. the C# client. The current library, 2.2, has a portable class library version inside of it and a Windows Phone app 8.1 version inside of it. Neither of those, I think, maybe one of them, will import cleanly into a .NET Core app. You could try. I haven't tried it personally. But it does mean that porting that code will be extremely trivial because we already have PCLs for it. There is a feature in RC2 that allows you to say, hey, I'm targeting this TFM, like Net Core App or Net Standard, but I also want you just to pretend that I'm targeting this portable profile or this other profile so that you can pull in NuGet packages that may not target your .NET Core specifically yet, and they may or may not work, but it's an escape hatch for you to be able to say, look, I know this DLL is just going to work, so just let me bring it in. So you could use that trick to try and see if these work, but we will get this up to date when we circle back around and start working on SignalR again. Next.
All right. There's a lot of MVC core project samples in the wild, but I can't find a web API, a basic starter with auth and auth. Any talk about boilerplate for web API starters? Probably something we can ask Dan.
Yeah, we should ask Dan about it. With auth and auth, yeah, that's the thing. So we had made a decision that we weren't going to ship a token server, an auth token server with web API in this version. We were going to rely on the community to do that, and so things like Identity Server 4, I think is the version they're doing now, would be used to do that. But I have heard feedback from some people that they still think Identity Server is somehow too much for some scenarios. I'm not well equipped to make a judgment on that. So I need to take that feedback and think about that from a product point of view, and I'll talk to Dan about that. But certainly our guidance at the moment is that you would use something like Identity Server to produce your auth tokens for Web API, but we do not have a template yet in the box that sets you up to do that. I would like us to do that. So I think by RTM, I'd very much like people to be able in VS to go file new, HTTP core, choose API, tick the Identity Server box because I want to produce auth, and then it produces, a startup template for you. I agree. So I will talk to Dan.
Damien agrees. Good. All right. Why weren't there more ASP.NET Core sessions at Build?
You can answer that one.
Too busy shipping. I know there was the labs, but they didn't scale. Queues were miles long. So that was a tough one. That's a question from Christian Hlang. So this build was a little different than previous builds. First, we had fewer sessions on purpose, tried to do more in the sessions that we had. Last time we had a whole pile of sessions. Some were not well attended. This year we had a few sessions that were very well attended, but we focused more, and not just we.NET, but Microsoft decided, or the bosses decided, that we wanted to try something a lot more hands-on. We hear more and more that people want labs. Well, it turns out that that was in fact correct. People did want labs. If I remember correctly, John, you ran 13 separate hours of labs, right?
12.
One lab over 12 times. So you ran a lab with 150 people, 12 times.
108 people. We ran a 4-hour class, and we repeated it 3 times. The one thing
it wasn't enough.
Well, so the first 2 days were completely packed, and there were long lines. There were spaces for all classes on the 3rd day. They were still pretty full, but there were spaces. So I don't know if people got fed up and didn't try again, or if people only went to the first 2 days of the conference and left on Friday. But there were spaces on Friday. So definitely, I mean, we didn't know if we were going to have empty rooms. We spent a lot of money.
Were they first come, first serve, or was it registration based?
There was like a fast pass kind of system where you got a ticket to reserve your place in the.
Did people use that a lot, or did most people just turn up and hope to get in?
You had to get a ticket.
Oh, really?
They were packed the first few days, like they sold out early. And I think the reason they did the tickets was to allow people to go to another session.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it sounds like the system was set up pretty well then.
Well, yeah, but there was some miscommunication the first day, so some people didn't get a ticket, and they're like, well, wait around just in case. Well, there was no chance they would get in. So they got really fed up. So, I mean, some of this, honestly, like I said, we didn't know if we were going to have, empty rooms, and we'd have worked for months and spent all this money on hardware and everything. So
It was
This
a
was
balance, right? You have to go and decide, are we going to go big or not? So we went medium, and we didn't know what we were doing. It was the first time we've ever done this before, and it turns out people really, really wanted to do these labs.
That's good.
So there were some people who didn't make it. The challenge was when we know for a fact that there's 108 slots. There's a fast pass ticket system. We tell people that we are now, we're done. Come back later, and they still stay in line. That's a challenge.
Mm-hmm. So,
I'm sorry. I think we'll do better next time. It sounds like people really like the labs.
Mm-hmm. I think those were kind of hands-on on building stuff with ASP.NET Core. There was no like new announcement stuff. Like that was the shipping code using RC1. So I mean, the other question there is kind of like, was there enough content on ASP.NET Core in general? I think there were a decent amount of sessions. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like,
again, there's a balance. I think that in this case here, we need to ship the thing first. So if we had more, if we'd shipped at build, and then there might be more sessions. But again, it takes time to build these labs. It takes time to build sessions. We don't have an unlimited number of people. It's unfortunate. Okay, we need to bang through these. We've been here for an hour, and we still have a ton of these things. There's a vote for targeted topics instead of chaos, so that would be a useful thing. There was a question that was sent to you, John, about will RC2 have support when it releases in VSO? Will we be able to go and do our automated builds and stuff?
That was the one I mentioned earlier.
You did mention
that. We did it at the top of the show. Yep.
Sorry, there's so many, I'm overwhelmed.
Sorry.
Is anyone working on an ASP.NET Core on Linux book or video series? I know that we, Damien and I, are on the hook for a Microsoft Virtual Academy when this thing releases, where we will go and do a full day of ASP.NET and .NET Core using no Windows stuff, no VS. We'll do everything on non-Windows. So that's on our list. But as far as is anyone doing books, people don't necessarily, surprisingly enough, tell us when they are doing books, sometimes until after the fact. So it is very possible. I know Jeff Fritz is working on a book, but that's about it. If you know you're working on a book, let us know so we can help you out. Cool. Couldn't get immutable collections working in Core.
Oh, well, definitely does because Roslyn uses it. So
yeah, I know it works. So Vladislav, I don't know about that one. So I'm not sure what's going on there. I'm not afraid I can help you with that. A tag helper guy here. Please fix the Microsoft CDN to add access control origin star.
I thought we did. I thought that's been fixed, like literally 4 weeks ago.
Sub-resource integrity thing. That's the. Oh, this is Mohammed from Sub-resource.
Yeah, I thought so. Okay.
Who do we ask about that?
They can email me or tweet me again. We definitely got it fixed such that we could serve the Bootstrap. Is it the icon fonts weren't working, and we had to get a course policy added for that. That now works, I'm told. I'm not aware of what the issue is that's preventing sub-resource integrity from working. So if someone could provide us with a little more detail about what exactly has to happen, because I did read up on this last time when we talked about this last time in the thing, and I couldn't quite understand why it wasn't working. So if I can get some more detail, I can forward it to the right people.
His question, he said, well, and I can forward this, but he said he needs the access control allow origin star HTTP header.
Well, that's just basically everything. Which that's exactly what that basically says to cause allow anyone to do cross-origin requests, which is what we added to get like Bootstrap fonts to work. So I'm not sure. I will check.
Cool. Someone says the ASP.NET Monsters are writing a next certification book. What about a Stack Overflow subsite for ASP.NET Core questions? I think ASP.NET Core would be the tag rather than a subsite. I don't know if this is a subsite appropriate thing. Is there even a vague schedule for certification exams as well as MBA courses? Maxime, so I own the MBA stuff, and that is all dependent on shipping. When RC2 ships, I can start developing the redoing of the beginner, an advanced version, and a Linux. Those are the 3 MBAs that I'm on the hook for. There's discussion for core, and there are people working on the core certification exams, but they're going to have to tidy up when RT2 comes out. Excuse me. VS 2012 Update 2 crashes with long path names due to node modules. It works if node modules is under the project, but crashes when anywhere else. Hiding the folder is not. Peter, I don't know if that is a known issue. It sounds like it's something I would have heard of. If you have a repro, email me, and I will plug you into the Update 2 people, because I have not seen that myself. I don't know that there was anything new around node modules in Update 2. I assume you're not using npm3, so yeah, let me know about that.
It might be as simple as like having it under www. Well, I don't know. Maybe his folder position is different. You know.
Could be. Well, I mean, if you're already under C users, et cetera, documents, I put everything in C/dev. But the long path thing is becoming a problem.
Yes.
Is there going to be any demo with the current build like the last stand-up? No, we are literally digging ourselves out. There's no time.
I will do one next week.
We're negative time. Damien promises a demo next week.
Yeah.
Any messaging libraries like NService Bus, Mass Transit, Azure Service Bus that already work on .NET Core? I thought
Service Bus doesn't yet. They're waiting on system.servicemodel.syndication, I think it is. NService Bus, I'm just searching. I don't know off the top of my head. What's this one say?
Yeah, we're still collecting people and projects. I think Bertrand has a list of the different projects that work on.
Yeah, and by all means, you should log issues on or comment on the issues on those particular repos if they have them about running on .NET Core, and if not, create them. That helps make sure that they know if we haven't got around to talking to them yet.
Okay. How do you run commands and scripts from project.json in the new .NET CLI world?
So you can't run scripts directly, and there is no commands anymore. We have a new thing called tools, which allows you to build a project tool using .NET Core that you can then put in a package and pull into a project.json file via the new tools section, and then you can invoke that by typing .NET space tool name, and that will run that tool in the context of your project. So that's there, and we use that for our own tools like EF and the Razor tooling, and user secrets and the publish IS tool that we have, and a whole bunch of .NET Watch, a bunch of stuff like that's written as a tool. And the scripts you don't invoke directly; they attach to events that relate to the other things that you do with the .NET command. So you can make a script run when a build occurs, or after a restore, or before a publish, for example.
What is going to happen to DNVM? Do we need to specify all the frameworks in the project.json, or is there still a DNVM underneath somewhere?
No, so DNVM is gone. The .NET CLI has baked into it the knowledge of multiple versions of both the runtime and the SDK being the .NET CLI itself. So there's still a similar concept in that your global JSON file can specify a version of the SDK that your project relies on, and then when you type .NET blah, it can check your current project and see if the version of the tools you're working is compatible with that version. If not, it can throw an error and tell you, or it can pick the right version of the SDK if you have more than one of them installed. So the same .NET exe can actually represent many different versions of the SDK, and it will dispatch to the correct SDK based on the current version that your project says it needs. So we have that multi-versioning capability built in, and the same goes for the framework. Because remember, DNX was a combination of tools and framework, and now they're separated slightly, and the .NET command is what bridges that sort of those two worlds and does the version selection for you. But you don't have to do that horrible thing DNVM did, which was actually modify your path to change the version of the tools and or framework you were using. In .NET, you always just use .NET, and that's the only thing on the path, and it figures out what version to use when you invoke it.
Okay. This person says that going from RC1 to RC2, They have plenty of battle scars. We should mention the CLI samples repro.
Yeah, so we have a ASP.NET slash CLI samples. Sorry. ASP.NET CLI samples is some very small representative ASP.NET core apps that run on top of the CLI. So if you want to look at the latest daily incantation of what a project JSON file and your code looks like to get an ASP.NET app up and running on .NET Core, that's the repo to look at.
All right. Excuse me. I'm tired. I'm tired of just clicking this button and answering all these questions because you're doing all the work. Migrating, I'm struggling with updating project.json. Is there they're migrating from DNX RC1 to .NET RC2. Is there a best place to find the latest details? I mean, you're really in a tough spot right now because you're on daily builds and stuff, and we're just not done. There will be better how to migrate.
There will be a document.
Right now, you're on your own.
Right now, you look at the announcements repo, because we still document breaking changes as we make them, but now you've got a whole bunch of months to go back if you're just coming in now. And you look at the things like the samples repo I just talked about, and our own repos to look at how our projects are structured. But there will be a document. But until we've finished, the document isn't going to help you much because some things are still changing daily.
All right. Now that Mono has been contributed to the .NET Foundation, how long do you think it will take for the .NET Standard Library to become the library for everything beyond core?
Now that is a very interesting question. I don't know. The dream is that the .NET Standard Library will very quickly become what .NET developers think about when they think about what version of the .NET API am I targeting. Where do I get my API from as a starting place? Like, I mean, the standard library doesn't include everything, obviously, because it can't, but it should include a very useful, compatible set that runs pretty much everywhere. So our intent is to have that happen as quickly as possible. So I don't know. I hope by the end of this year we see the meaningful majority of packages, those packages that represent the largest portion of downloads from NuGet.org, obviously not the long tail, but the 80-20 rule type of thing. Really love to see those move to be net standard based, and depending on the standard library, or I mean the constituent contracts if that's what they want to do, by the end of this year. But I want, hopefully this time next year when we talk about .NET and we teach it, it will be, hey, you get your .NET CLI, here's .NET New, you type a thing, and you're just targeting standard library. Like, all you think about is that my API comes from the .NET standard library. Just like we used to think about our API came from the BCL. When we thought about API, you just got the BCL, or you installed some third-party SDK. In the new world, you'll get the standard library, or you've installed a NuGet package.
Right. Will the .NET CLI be used for UWP apps at some point down the line?
I don't know.
Be cool if it was.
I mean, there's no reason it couldn't be, although UWP is typically a much more visual development experience because you're typically building like graphics apps with UIs and stuff, so VS makes a lot more sense under the covers. And I'm not sure the same drivers that led us to using the CLI-based approach for core as a platform model, or app model I should say, really apply for things like UWP. I think in UWP it's much more natural that you open Visual Studio, do file new, and then code the hardware. So, but yeah, maybe.
What does the imports do in the framework section of project.json?
So that's what I was referring to before. That's the ability to say, hey, this project is compiling for .NET Core App 1.0, which is the new TFM in the .NET CLI that represents an app that runs using the .NET Core CLI. Basically, you can type .NET my app and it will run. That TFM, though, no one has compiled to that TFM yet because it's brand new. So if you go to NuGet and download JSON.NET, there's no TFM that matches .NET Core App. And the only TFM that .NET Core App inherits from is the Net Standard TFM because we're trying to reply everything on Net Standard. So in order to get NuGet packages to correctly install into your project, when they don't have assemblies or assets for that TFM, you can tell the project system, please also import assets from these other TFMs. And you're free to put in whatever TFM you want in there, and we will just blindly treat it as compatible. it may fail horribly when you try and compile or run, but obviously this is one of those backdoors where you can just say, hey, I know that this DLL inside TFM foo, inside this package, will work the way I'm using it, so please just resolve it correctly and let me run.
Cool. Not a question, but a thought. Keynotes were way too long. Sessions were way too short. Yeah, well, the sessions are an hour every year. I guess they could have been an hour and a half. This is an interesting thought. Could have been nice to have all-day.NET on Wednesday and all-day Azure on Thursday. That's good. That's good. I like that. That's from Alexandra. Going through a couple of other things. So you're going to go and check on the HTTP header issue. Checked on that. He's saying that the HTTP header is not being served up for every resource.
Only for Bootstrap.
Yeah, that's interesting.
What was that, sorry?
Oh, the HTTP header person was saying that it was not getting headers aren't being being served up for every resource, only for Bootstrap. So that implies that there's a configuration in some places, not others.
Okay, I'll revisit that.
Alan was asking about UWP for being able to reference NuGets and its source and all the different things that you get around project.json.
Yeah, so there are other features coming in Visual Studio. I know Hunter demoed one in your talk that are like indexing of source code of open source packages, so that which is another way of getting some of those similar features that we did in Xproj into the existing project systems. So
indeed. How can I securely authenticate web APIs from C# applications? I want to use servers with core identity with individual user accounts. Yeah, we need to do a blog post on that stuff. So there's there's OAuth style identity, and then there's the basic auth from back in the day, and there's NTLM and all those kinds of things. I think we should talk to Vittorio, and I'll talk to Jeff Fritz, and we can get like a matrix of here are all the different ways you can authenticate. What's good, bad, indifferent.
There's certainly a lot of prior art there. Like I'm not going to.
There is a lot of prior art. I'd be off Googling for it myself.
Exactly. It's the same technology and sort of algorithms and exchange protocols and things, no matter what stack you're using, and all the standard thinking changes from year to year about what's the best approach. Depending on your scenarios, but certainly there will be a way to do those things in ASP.NET Core. But I would encourage people to look for the existing guidance around how to do those type of things.
Indeed. Okay.
3 left.
What do we got? 4 left. What's that?
4 left.
It's too many.
No new questions. Stop asking questions.
They're so kind, though.
I just answered that one about scripts and.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Love the new Docker tooling, but I'm having a hard time convincing companies' infrastructure guys it's a good thing. How do you argue that containers are good from an infrastructure point of view? That's beyond the scope of what we're doing here, but I would encourage you to look at any Docker 101 that would explain to you that reliable deployments, absolutely like how many times have you deployed something and had a stray file show up? Containers solve that. That's tough. It's like saying, how do you prove to someone gravity exists?
I mean, it's a smaller unit of deployment, and you get all of the benefits of having less moving parts. And when you look at that container, you see a box. You don't have to worry about what's happening. It's a mini VM.
Can't stop it. And there is going to be a blog post though on Docker 101 coming on the web dev blog this week. So
nice.
Let's do this. We will promise to make some statement in that to help you out.
Okay.
This person says that they're setting up CI in Visual Studio Online with RC1, and the build is failing. Trying to build the CLR and not core CLR. Why?
Well, that typically is based purely on either the TFMs that you have in your project.json file, or the environment path is choosing the DNX from the DNX45X folder instead of the other one, although that shouldn't prevent you from building. So you'll be able to build one with the other. It's more of a problem when you come to running. So I'm not particularly sure what might be causing that. I'm not aware of any sort of well-known issues. It might just
I know that it works. That's not really helpful, but I know that it works. So we will try to figure that out. A lot of focus on the shared framework approach, but I'm going the other way. I like doing standalone. I want a standalone native. Will that be an RTM or is that post RTM?
No, native is postponed.
Native ASP.NET.
Native everything. So the .NET
Native
CLI RTM will not include the native compiler stuff that we showed in November. That was a very, very early demo at best. We are going through we're doing a bit of an assessment at the moment as a side thing about the requirements and the needs and the drives around .NET Native in this app model. Obviously, .NET Native is well established in things like UWP, where it's used in the App Store to compile stuff and part of the toolchain. This .NET Native is slightly different, but based on the same sort of things. And we're just making sure that we're doing it for the right reasons. I definitely think that there will be a call for it when we get to things like microservices and container-based deployment. It is nice to be able to say I deployed exactly one thing, and its startup time is practically instant because you don't pay any of the cost associated with booting a managed runtime and then turning that code into executable code by having it run through a jitter. That is a substantial cost in large applications. Like the Waslin assembly just itself, as a representation of a large assembly, takes 4 to 5 seconds just to JIT on a typical dev machine. So like it is a very expensive operation for large apps, which is why in ASP.NET previously we've had the ASP.NET precompile and merge commands so that you could effectively native compile your ASP.NET views using, or ASP.NET apps using ASP.NET precompile and ASP.NET merge tools. For .NET Core CLI and 1.0, we will not have the native stuff there, but we are continuing to invest in it. And we will, I think after 1.0, once the dust settles, we'll be able to make some clearer statements about what the roadmap for that is. It introduces a bunch of restrictions right now in what you can and can't do in your application because of the differences in when you don't have code that you can generate at runtime. So we're still working through those things and making sure we can message those and make them understandable and why some things work in some platforms and not in others, and what are the trade-offs basically associated with that. So.
All right, cool. All right, let's just call it now because I'm tired.
All right.
Sorry, that was super, super long.
It was. But we didn't have one last week, so it was a catch-up.
Yeah, it was a catch-up. Thanks for your patience and for sticking with us. And what do I got to do now? I'm looking at my calendar. We got to actually go work now.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to have some lunch after I do my dramatic zoom out.
All right, do your dramatic zoom out.
Bye, everybody.
Dramatic zoom out in Redmond.